Okay, good. Okay, hello. I'm Dr. Tricia Benish, and I'm a child psychologist, and I've been a behavior specialist for 10 years, and I work with children with developmental disabilities and autism and have lots of experience. It's my heart really to work with this population, and I love what I do, so I'm really excited to be here today to bring you some information about behavior management. What I want to talk to you today is about improving compliance and managing your child by still maintaining the relationship that you have with them. So I saw some eyebrows raised. That looks like it could be a big feat to do, right? So having behavior difficulties is something that all children do, right? As a rite of passage. As a baby is born, then they first connect with their mother, and they don't do much separate from them. But once they start to gain more independence and more skills, then we see their little personality emerge, and we see that they have better motor skills and they have more independence and more separation, and they realize that my behavior is not controlled by my parent or my caregiver anymore. And at that time, we might see some behavior problems arise. So your child might be the one who falls in the floor whenever they're told to do something they don't want to do. Or your child might be the runner who runs away and tries to get away from all of your commands when they don't want to comply. Or they might just be a passive little ignorer and just pretend like they don't really hear what you're saying. And sometimes it's hard to know what the reasoning is because these behaviors all communicate something, but it's up to us to find out what it is. But I want to give you some strategies today to help these little ones test their limits in appropriate ways that will help them assert their independence and find their way through the world, but will also give you techniques to set appropriate limits and boundaries for them. But let me know who's in our audience right now. How many of you have little ones?
What would we say is little?
Okay, so let's say 0 to 3. No. Okay, 3 to 5? 5 to 7, 7 to 12.
But he has Down syndrome.
Okay.
Like a younger.
So chronologically,
Yeah.
but okay. And 15-year-olds.
I have a 16-year-old with Down syndrome.
Okay, perfect. All right, helpful to know who's in here. The good thing is that, I specialize in pediatrics, which means the younger age group, but the strategies that I'm going to talk about today are applicable for all ranges and all developmental levels. And the list that you have are all evidence-based proven strategies to use to help to manage behavior. So we'll start to go through those. I remember when my little one started, the day she realized that she could throw a fit, she was told that she couldn't have something that she wanted, so she trotted over to the edge of the living room and carefully placed herself down onto the floor, all while looking at me to see what my reaction would be. And I just waited to see what she was going to do because this was a new skill for her, if you think about it. And she started to cry, and then it escalated, so I intervened. But at that moment, her behavior was communicating to me that she was unhappy. She didn't have the words to communicate what she wanted, so her behavior was telling me what she wanted. And it was up to me to set the appropriate limits and boundaries for her. So I intervened, and from then on, we shaped her behavior into what it is today. So I imagine that that's the course that you all expect to have, but you have children who are unique in their own disabilities and their own skills and their own developmental levels. And it may occur at a different rate than typically developing children do. The first strategy that we can use, and this is applicable for everyone, is to increase your positive attention and improve your relationship. That's at the core of all behavior management, because really we can't make kids do anything. We can't make them behave a certain way, can't control their behavior, but we can set them up to where they're more likely to want to. And if they're more likely to want to please us, then they're going to have better behavior. It's like if you can think back in your own life, do you have a teacher or a boss or someone who you really wanted to please? Think about the characteristics that that person had. Were they nice? Were they happy a lot of the times? Were they helpful, supportive? Or were they harsh and punitive? Did they always yell at you and nitpick on all the little things that you did wrong? Most likely you're going to say that they were really helpful and supportive and you felt like they had your back. That's how we want our children to view us, as their leaders. So that way they will want to please us, and that will set the foundation for good behavior from them. But that doesn't mean that you have to devote every waking hour to your kid either. So what we recommend is that you would spend increased time with positive attention with your kid by trying to schedule like 10 to 15 minutes every day to have undivided child-directed time. And what that means, if it's child-directed, is that you're sitting down with your kiddo doing something that they choose to do. You're turning off the television, putting your cell phone aside, so you're showing them that you're really dedicating this time just to be with them. And when you do that, you show how invested you are, and you're really strengthening that relationship and the bond that you have with your kid. You can do something like, for younger kids, you might do puzzles or play Play-Doh or play Mr. Potato Head games. Even for babies, it's applicable too, where you're playing Tickle Time or doing peekaboo games. And then for older kids, it might be doing an art activity or doing something like going for a walk or riding bikes together. You just don't want to do things like video games, because that's the focus on the video and not on the relationship that you're trying to enhance. Doing this with your child every day increases the likelihood that they're going to want to please you, and it also makes the negative consequences more effective. So if you have to give a time out to a kid, it's going to be more punitive and more effective if they're used to really always being in good relationship with you. And if you try to use something like selective ignoring for a behavior like whining or complaining about something, then it's also going to make it more effective, because they're not used to always being ignored. So I believe that if you try this and implement it on a regular basis, then it'll make you and your child happier. When you do this, you want to be sure that you remove distractions during your time together. You want to avoid asking too many questions. So if you're sitting down with your little one and you're doing an activity, you don't want to quiz them a whole lot about what they're doing and ask a ton of questions. Like, why did you put the potato head's eyes on top of his head? It doesn't go there. Just go with it and say, oh, you put the eyes on top. How cool. Or if your child colors a picture and says, look, I colored Daddy, and Daddy's blue and has green hands, then just say, that's awesome, Dad looks good blue. You did it. So it's really a skill, and it sounds very easy, but it's harder than you think to take away all of those directives and the questioning that you do whenever you interact with your child on a daily basis. Just comment on their play. Say, oh, look, you put Mr. Potato's head eyes on top. And then relax and really focus on letting the child be creative and listen. The more you sit and just be present with your kids, the more they're going to open up and tell you things that they wouldn't normally tell you, because the day is so structured and rushed along all the time. So many families have obstacles to implementing this strategy, though, because we're really busy and we have more kids than one, and Dad's gone running errands and Mom's trying to get supper cooked, and we have lots of stuff going on. But if you can make it a priority in your schedule to put this time in, I promise it will make a big difference for you. It's optimal if both parents can really spend that time with the child, but if you can't, at least try to schedule in one. And try and do it alone with the kid. Even if you have 3 or 4 kids in your house, try and do individual time with each child on their own if you can. If it's safe to leave the other child alone for a little while. Remember that it's an investment to put positive intention in place, and you'll spend less time redirecting and disciplining on the other end if you're investing the time in the front end. And during the time that you're spending your special time together, if your child has some behavior issues like whining or refusal or whatever, then you can implement the same kind of strategies that you typically use you might have to do a brief timeout or some ignoring. But you want to try and establish that quality time on a regular basis, and you'll see the behaviors go down. So the next thing on your list is praising compliant behavior. It can be really hard to notice good behavior when your child is constantly refusing to listen. And it's important to find good behaviors to praise. Then you have to do the noticing intervention in that case. The noticing intervention is used when you find yourself constantly saying, stop, don't do that, get down from there. I told you not to mess with that. So all of your interaction, everything you're saying is constantly giving your child a negative or a command. So you have to find ways to give your child positives. So the noticing intervention would just be like, oh, look, you're sitting up so nicely. You choose something that you want your child to be doing, and you praise that particular behavior. And if your child, you say, well, they are not ever doing anything that I want them to be doing, then you create ways. You may even have to say, you wore a red hat today, and just make it sound genuine, but you're noticing. And that makes children feel really good when they see that you're noticing things about them. You chose a red hat, and I think that's awesome. So you notice things, and then you praise the behaviors that you want to see. If you want your children to comply with you more, then you praise the behavior that you want to see more. So pick 1 to 3 things that you want to see more, and you focus on really praising those 3 things. Praise for compliance is really effective when you praise them for following the rules. So if your child takes their shoes off at the door whenever they walk in, and that's a family rule, then that's a great opportunity for you to say something to them and make it specific. You took your shoes off. That's a great job. You remembered. That's so helpful. Pointing out when your child is following the rules or telling him that you appreciate his compliance will motivate him to keep up the good work. And we really want to focus on those behaviors that we want to see more of. So catch your child being good, and that positive reinforcement will encourage those behaviors to continue. For praising behaviors, it's also helpful to increase pro-social behaviors, not just compliance. So if your child is having problems playing with other kids or sharing and taking turns, then praise can be a very effective tool for increasing those behaviors as well. Using kind words, using your manners, getting along well with others, those are all excellent behaviors to target with just using praise. And it sounds so simple, but if you implement it, you'll see the power in it. And then even effort. Praise is very, very effective for effort. So if you're trying to shape a behavior that you want, let's say potty training, and your child just hasn't gotten to that point yet, then we can break it down into smaller steps and praise your child for the effort. So if they run toward the potty, then you can give them a high five and lots of praise to say, you tried. Or if they're working on a new assignment, let's say that they're not getting it in the new math strategy that they're trying to teach, then just praise the effort. Say, you tried, and I'm really proud of you. I'm not concerned that you didn't make a 100 on the test, but you did your best. If you can praise them for their effort, then you'll see their motivation stays up. And if their motivation stays up, then they're more willing to try. If they're more willing to try, then they're going to get the skills eventually. So,
Can I ask you a question
yes,
about that?
ma'am.
So what I'm running into with a teenager now is him dismissing the praise, or it making him, not upsetting him, but changing the mood to a negative. Do you know what I mean? If I say, I love the way tonight at dinner, whatever, you were chewing with your mouth shut, the things that we've been working on, it's almost like he doesn't want to hear it. I don't know how else should I wait till later and come back to it maybe, instead of right at the time, at the end of the dinner or whatever?
Ask yourself, what is it about the praise that he doesn't like to receive? Does he have some self-consciousness that he doesn't want you to point it out in front of everyone else? Is it because it's
Now, I
in
have
front of
made sure
others?
not to point it out. You know, I do it when it's just either he and I, or
Mhm.
I mean, it's just the three of us. He's our only child, but
Okay,
I don't do it like at a big family dinner or out to eat or whatever. But
okay.
so I haven't done that. But it may be that he is self-conscious about it. I haven't
It
really
could
thought
be.
about that.
It could be that he does not, like the sound of your voice could be aversive even during that time.
I've
Hey, Tara,
heard that before, you know.
Let's give it.
Yeah, and for teenagers,
Well, and
that's
so, and that's
typical.
what, I mean, maybe it is because it's coming from me, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But, so I'm kinda at a loss on how to,
So you can ask
I am
yourself,
really impressed with him with all the dental stuff he's got going on and that he's really making the effort.
and if you're giving a lot of instructions anyway, if it can tend to sound like nagging, and then when you say something good, it doesn't sound any different than the typical nagging or giving a lot of instructions does. So you might consider finding a different way to praise. So you could develop something that he likes. What's a signal? What's a thumbs up or a high five? Or
Oh,
you
okay.
notice, you're like, good
Okay, on
job.
the down low, kinda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Rashawn will even say right now, the sound of your voice makes me mad.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you think that as a mom, instruction or trying to teach your child comes across to them as nagging or negative instead of maybe they hear it, even though you're just trying to teach them,
Mhm.
but they hear it in a negative fashion?
Yes, I think that is very common.
Yeah.
Mhm. And so that's really the point of the first segment when I talked about just spending time being with your kids so that you're taking away all of that nagging that, the nagging that they perceive when you're trying to actually teach. But it's just the time that you're being with them. So then whenever you do use words, it's more effective. Yeah, and they know that it's going to be important when mom says something. It's not going to be nitpicky like pull up your socks, fix your hair, put your hands down.
Stand up straight.
Stand up straight, yeah, color
Wipe
in
your mouth.
in the lines,
Yeah, 'cause
all of those little things
I
that
think
don't
my
matter.
16-year-old, he thinks that when I praise him now, it's belittling him.
Well, kind of,
He
that's
doesn't
what this
need
coming
that.
across with Al too, and I'm just like, I feel like I can't win for losing.
That's why I'm 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Or when they're getting out of the car, you're like trying to prepare them to let them out. Okay, now, make sure you don't do this and make sure, wipe the stuff off your face and it's almost like this. And then he'll turn around and say, "I got his mom."
Yeah,
Mhm.
It's like, be quiet.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're trying to teach them and prepare them, but maybe we shouldn't do so much of that. And
Okay, so that gets into another area of overparenting.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that.
So gotcha.
My
We'll let
husband will
you
tell
talk.
I overparent him.
Yes. So
You have
yeah,
a seminar for all day.
when we overparent, then we're demeaning your child's ability to take care of their own needs. And we have to let them go out and make some mistakes. And so it's a delicate balance, I understand. And you don't want to get a call later on saying that, your kid had toilet paper stuck to their shoe all day long, or they, they had their shirt on inside out. But some of these mistakes are okay to make, right? How are we going to learn if we don't make little mistakes?
I guess it's a reflection on us too, that, we want our special needs children to, not stand out.
Yeah.
And not look so different when they already do.
Right.
And so it's almost like you're going, let me just remind them of everything, so you'll have a better chance of walking into Taekwondo without ravioli all over your face and looking like you're two.
They don't realize
Right.
it's a mistake.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
so
what-
that's, I
I
guess
haven't learned
that's
that yet.
our fault though, that's us.
So I would look for trends then. If ravioli on the face is a common occurrence, then teach that at home as a procedure that as soon as I finish eating, I go and check my face in the bathroom.
You're not
So
bring
that way
to
you're
the-
not at the car at the last moment, because then you're really increasing anxiety in your child when you want them to be normal going out of the car and have, a calm demeanor.
Yeah.
Transitions are hard
Transitions are hard.
for all kids.
Yes.
Well, and I try to do, before we ever get to the place where we're dropping off, if we're in the car, I hand him the wet wipe. you know, check your face, your hands, and so it's not right at the time when he's getting out. It's before he's thinking about, do you know what I'm saying? If I notice it ahead of time.
Mhm. And so you're saying maybe that you're taking the verbalization out of it, it's just a gesture of care.
Handing him the wet wipe. Way, you know, before the transition is upon us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we were talking about praise and praising effort, not necessarily the outcome, how it keeps up your healthy self-esteem whenever you can feel good about the effort that you've put forth, and then making sure that you offer genuine praise. And then, okay, so another strategy is to offer choices. One of the best ways to combat defiant behaviors is to offer two different choices. They have to be positive choices though. We don't want to get caught in the trap of saying, well, you can do it or you can lose your privileges. You can do it or you can go to timeout, because that's not really a choice for kids. When you're giving positive choices, you're teaching them that they have some control over the situation and in their environment, but you need to set it up where these choices are things that are desirable to your child. So if getting dressed in the morning is an issue, for example, you might say, do you want to wear the princess dress or the flamingos dress? And you know that your child likes both of those dresses. You can't bring in the cute little romper that has the flowers on it that you really liked at TJ Maxx, and your child hates it because she can't fit her shorts on underneath the romper, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Not speaking from personal experience.
That sounded pretty specific.
Yeah, so princesses and flamingos are way more desirable, and I know that if I present those two options to her, then she's going to say, okay, let me see, which one do I want? And we're much more likely to have a good morning that way. And then I just have to put my agenda behind and then work on that strategy later on, you know. But positive choices are really, really powerful, and they can be used for any age group. Can you guys think of some other ways that you could use positive choices with your kiddos?
Would you like to mow the grass before dinner and have a chance to hang out after dinner, or do you want to eat dinner and then mow it after? I mean,
Okay,
you know,
that works.
I would
choice
rather
not to mow the
not
grass.
mow the grass.
let them have some control on when.
Yes, the time. That's very important. Would you like to mow the grass in the front yard or the backyard first? Any others? Yes.
Do you want to have a grilled cheese sandwich or peanut butter for lunch?
That's good.
Very good.
Yes.
Right.
Or banana.
Oh, you can have banana with them.
Yeah. And then we want to stop ourselves from engaging in too much language. Because if you're giving lots and lots of options, because then your brain is generating all the options and the ways you can make this lunch really great, but then you've lost it at that point. The point was to get them to lunch, not to have a big conversation about all the options and all the things that you like, and then they're overwhelmed and lost in the moment. So offering positive choices is very, very helpful. You just want to be sure that you're avoiding making the backhanded choices for them that really aren't choices, like you can listen or go to timeout. Then using first then statements. Have you guys heard of those? Okay. First then. Go ahead.
There's first thing boards that you
Yes,
can do.
exactly. I was going to talk about that.
Sorry.
No, that's great. I'm glad that you have some experience with it. So first then statements are really important. First we eat our food, then we have dessert. So it sets your child up to know what the order of things are, what your expectations are, and that you're not going to give in, because this is how you're setting your limit. First, then. And if you use that language over and over again, then it establishes a precedent for you that your child knows that when mom uses those two words, that she means business. She's not going to give in. First, you eat your vegetables, then you can have a cookie. First, you wash your hands, then you can sit down at the table. First, I don't know, there's lots of other examples to use.
First, then you play.
First work, then play. Yes, it's a common strategy used in preschool classrooms too. First we clean up our toys, then we have snack. Or, first we line up, and then you walk down the hallway. So we break it down into smaller and smaller tasks so we know that our kids can be successful with them and never require too much of them. We think about what they can handle according to their developmental level, and we put in those appropriate limits and choices and the order of operations for them so they can be successful. When you're doing these things, it's all really about prevention. It's about setting up their environment where they're going to be more successful throughout the day by helping them know what to expect and to help them know what the procedure is. A lot of our kiddos function best whenever there's consistent procedures and routines in place. I think all children do when they know what to expect throughout the day. And these tools help you to do that for them. So after you've done your praise, your time with your kids, you've offered choices, you use a first then statement, another thing you can do is to give effective commands. Okay, so the first ones we talked about were kind of about setting your child up for success. Now this one is more specific, and this is where it gets tricky because it's hard to give kids commands. And you question yourself a lot as a parent about how many commands, what's an appropriate command, how should I talk to them? And there's so much stuff out there in the research. If you Google it, then you might even get confused about how to ask your kids to do something, right? Because you're saying the wrong thing or you're focusing on too many things. Okay, so let me narrow it down for you. Giving effective commands involves not giving too many commands, first of all. So you think about what your child's developmental level is, and then you match your commands to whatever they are able to do. If they can only handle one command at a time, then only give one command at a time. Avoid trying to slip in too many things because you're trying to get your agenda done. If you know they can only handle taking their shoes to the bedroom and putting it in the closet, then only ask them to do that. And then wait until they do that, and then praise them for actually achieving that. And if you know that they are likely to be a little defiant, then you wait and follow up to make sure that every time you give that command for them to go put their shoes in their closet, that they're actually doing that. It takes time, but when you put it in consistently in the beginning, then they'll know that when mama asks or daddy asks or other caregiver asks them to do something, that they're going to follow up and be consistent about it. And so they'll stop trying to test the limits as much. So giving too many commands also goes back to the thing we talked about giving too many nitpicky things. So be sure that when you're giving a command that's really important, that you haven't just given a string of other commands that weren't really important, because then they're going to just zone you out and you're going to be like the white noise in the background that is always saying wah, 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 wah. The next point is if you're giving weak directions. So the words you choose when you give commands are really important. Saying things like, will you please go brush your teeth now? Gives your child the sense that they have an option. If you're saying, please, will you, how about we do it now? Or if you follow up with, okay, will you pick up your toys, okay? It's time to go sit down at the table, okay? Then your child may say, no way, Jose, it's not okay with me. And then you are the one who've actually set them up to give you that answer. So we want to be sure that we're giving strong directives. A good directive makes your command clear. And you want to avoid phrasing it like you're asking your mother-in-law for a favor. Like, I really love my mother-in-law and she's very supportive to me, but I feel like I don't really want to ask her for things, so I might feel nervous about saying, hey, can you keep the kids this weekend? You never want to phrase those commands to your children like you're asking that kind of thing. You want to state the rationale beforehand and then give the command in a firm, authoritative voice. So it's okay to say the reason why and then say the command. It's almost dark outside, so it's time to pick up your bicycle and put it away. Or it's almost bedtime, so let's go sit down for our snack. the reason first and then the command. Another problem that often comes up with giving commands is when you repeat your instructions too much. So if you find yourself saying, I've asked you 5 times to quit playing in the water, won't you quit? Then you can probably guarantee that you're nagging your kids too much. You should only have to give a command one time for your child to know that you mean business and that you're going to follow through with it. They'll start to listen the first time you speak if you're consistent with it. If you repeat your instructions over and over again, then they'll realize that there's no incentive and they can get away with it 10% or 20%. And then after you are giving effective commands, then you can give an if-then warning. So if you give a command, you know you've given an effective command the appropriate way, and they don't react, you wait 5 seconds and then give an if-then warning. So an if-then warning sounds like if you do not pick up your toys right now, then you will have to go to timeout. Or if you don't comb your hair right now, you're going to have to go to school with messy hair. Or if you don't turn your video game off right now, then you won't be able to play it for a day. So you state what the consequence would be, and you wait for them to comply. And if they don't, you have to follow through with whatever the consequence is. You have to be consistent with it. You cannot make empty threats and expect your children to learn to obey you. So you keep being consistent, and then you will also avoid power struggles because your child will know what to expect. When you sit down with your children and you talk about the rules ahead of time, so they know what's important to you and what the rules are in your family, then there are never any surprises. So when you give a command, when there's a consequence, then you can stay even-keeled and level-headed, and you don't have to get angry. You can just implement the consequence because your child already knows what it's going to be. This teaches your child to manage their own behavior and to realize that all behaviors result in something for me. And that's what we really want for our kids, to realize that everything I do results in a consequence. It could be something good and it could be something negative. But they're learning that there's cause and effect, and that's how you teach them through effective and consistent discipline. So we want to be sure that we're using appropriate consequences too. So there are different kinds of consequences. Common to little kids are just redirection or taking something away and replacing it with something else. For babies, that's what we want to do, or using a firm voice. For toddlers, they can handle things like timeout added in addition to redirection. For preschoolers, we still want to use timeout and redirection and a firm voice. And then we can also take away, like put a toy in timeout for a little while. And then for older kids, our young children, we can take away privileges or take away toys as consequences. And then for older teenagers, that's what's the biggest thing for them is their independence. You know, they want Facebook and they want to drive and they want to have time with their friends. So losing privileges like that is appropriate when you're at that teenage age. Also, we want to consider using natural consequences. Natural consequences are things that happen on their own as a result of the child's behavior. So if you lose your cell phone, that means you just don't have a cell phone anymore. Or if you forget your homework at home, then you just get a 0 every day. But as you know, parents, we're quick to rush in and to save them. But when you do that, you're really not teaching them that there are consequences in life. And then there are also consequences that are called logical consequences. Those are the steps that we take as caregivers to help our children see that choosing poor behaviors comes with some unpleasant side effects. And these aren't really punishments because they're not punitive, but it's just what happens as a result of their behavior. And it's unpleasant enough that your child won't want to suffer the same consequences again and again, so it serves as a motivator to change their own behavior. So I've gone through most of the stuff on the list, but I wanted to have just a couple of minutes to take questions. Yes,
I have a
ma'am.
question. So one of the things that, with my 16-year-old that we're dealing with right now, he, back when he was in preschool, even most of elementary, he really just, like, if you wanted to have a talk about, hey, you know, if someone asked about the way you walk, you can say, I have cerebral palsy. And he'd get like upset, like, they don't need to know that. I'm just like everybody else. He like really didn't see as much of the differences. But now that he is 16, he sees more and more of how he's different. And he keeps wanting to use the phrase about wanting to be normal. And so I don't know that I'm handling that right. My response has been, let's not use the word normal. Everybody's unique in their own way, but I'm like the stupid mom who doesn't know anything, because that's what he thinks right now, is I don't know what I'm talking about. So I don't know what a good way to approach that is, because he's so intent on, it's just kind of, I guess it's sad, because he's been so confident and doing things just like everybody else. And now the older he's gotten, he sees some more of the differences, and he has some, now he's not in some of the same classes as some of his friends that he has been in all this time, because math got too hard in 9th grade. And so I'm seeing him become more and more like not wanting to be as social, wanting to just play video games. And of course we put boundaries around that and make sure he still has to go to martial arts, even though he says it's stupid. You know, all these things teenagers do. But I don't know how to really address that normal word appropriately.
There are a few different ideas that I have as you're speaking. I would say that normal for anyone occurs on a very wide spectrum.
Exactly.
So explaining that could be helpful
Yes.
to make that rationale for him. I would also be certain to look for strengths and work on those with him. I felt like the young adult panel that we had up here earlier had such wisdom in what they were telling us. And I even made notes at the end because I wanted to mention that all behavior communicates something. And if he's starting to be concerned about normal, then what else is it underlying that he wants to express that he just can't?
I don't know about your house, but at ours, we kind of forgot to talk to Al about having Down syndrome, because that's not our focus. And he has gone through a couple different stages of grieving. And,
Probably it.
and I was wondering if maybe that was something like that. And we noticed changes in behavior when he was going through that, and even a breakdown finally when we could pull it out of him and he could talk about it.
There are counseling programs that are great. Throw a little plug for Arkansas
Yes.
Families First, where I work actually. There's some brochures up here. We do psychological testing and we do counseling for children. And just because your kid has a developmental disability doesn't mean that they're immune to other things like
Right.
anxiety, OCD, depression, behavior difficulties, anger problems, and processing the grief that can come along with being a teenager and realizing that I have challenges that are different.
I thought about taking Al in to talk to a counselor, just so, because you don't want to talk to your mom or your dad or just somebody neutral that he could speak about whatever is bothering him.
And we've gone to a counselor, and then he's like, well, I don't need that. I think somehow he's gotten this societal perception that going to a counselor is bad. You know, that whole stigma against mental health. So it's just like some of the things we're dealing with, I guess I wasn't expecting to have to deal with, you know, so.
Well, thank you for your question.
Thank you so much. Wrap up for day 2. You might be able to stick around.